Hi, everybody. How's it going? This is Edom Abon of LightCycleAstrology.com. Welcome back to the channel, friends. Today, we are going to talk about this big, bad Mars-Pluto-Jupiter T-Square that is setting itself up right as the new moon comes through the last few degrees of Taurus, and we begin a new lunation cycle. So, for sure, this T-Square aspect between these three planets, these heavyweight, powerful planets, are going to be seeding the energy of the new moon and bringing us on into a new cycle, and really is describing the first half of the new lunation cycle ahead before we get to the full moon. That first part of the cycle is really all about this T-square energy. So I thought we would go into that today. Now, what I did on Wednesday's content is I described part of the leg of this T-square. I described the Jupiter square Pluto aspect just on its own. And that's because that was the first leg of this aspect to set itself up as Jupiter entered Taurus last Tuesday. Wednesday, we saw the perfection between the two planets in square. And I didn't think it would make sense to talk about one of the aspects without the other because they're essentially forming a dynamic among themselves. So in traditional astrology, this isn't really something that we have examples of ancient astrologers kind of doing. So this is kind of more of a modern thing when we talk about T-squares, but it just didn't make sense to try to itemize and make themes for each individual aspect when they're really all part of a structure. So I thought it would just make a lot more sense and be simpler and easier to grasp if we came up with some themes to watch for and rendered or synthesized down basic overarching themes that get at maybe what the T-square energy is all about, especially as we're going to be experiencing this over the first half of the new lunation cycle ahead. So that is what we're going to do today. We're going to talk about this T-square. And of course, before we get into it, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, hit notifications. Leave me some comments in the comment section. That's always really good to hear how you guys are experiencing the astrology. And of course, you can always go to my website, lightcycleastrology.com, if you're ever interested in finding out about a reading from me. All right, well, let's go ahead and pull up the real-time clock, and we'll take a look at the timing of this T-square as it's forming before we get into the themes to watch for here. So the first thing that is happening is going to be that we have the new moon coming through at 29 degrees and 25 arc minutes of Gemini, and this is happening on Friday, May the 19th at 11:53 a.m. Eastern Standard Time is the time that I use. So here's the new moon coming through. And really, the only part of the T-square that is formed at this point is the Jupiter square back to Pluto, which has actually already perfected as of last Wednesday this week. So if you missed Wednesday's video, we go into just the energy for this particular aspect. And that's because what we're doing is we're waiting for Mars to jump into the sign of Leo before the whole T-square architecture is set up. And that's the next thing that happens is as we roll forward just the next day here, we're going to see that there goes Mars into Leo. And of course, we are going to immediately see Mars engage Pluto over in Aquarius by applying to an opposition to Pluto. And this is going to perfect rather rapidly since Pluto is so close to the very beginning of the sign of Aquarius. Anytime a planet jumps into the beginning of a new sign, you're going to see if that sign has aspect back to the whole sign of Aquarius, you're going to see that planet having to go through the gauntlet of Pluto first, almost having to descend in through the gates of hell or the underworld, as it were. So now what happens, of course, obviously, too, is that Mars is going to immediately upon entering Leo make a square back to Jupiter. And now we are going to see, if I put the lines back on here, we're going to see that the T-square architecture is now set up, along with the sun about to move into Gemini and form and perfect a trine to Pluto very, very quickly as well. So one interesting thing about this T-square, just the nature of this, is that normally we'd have a lot more time for planets to begin to apply to each other, and there would be this buildup where we would kind of get an increasing, intensity or buildup of the energy, and then the energy would perfect at various times, and then it would start to dissipate. But with this T-square, what we have is because Pluto is so near the beginning of Aquarius, we have when planets enter a sign, that's already kind of a big jump for a planet. There's a whole new vibe as each planet enters a sign. So you get the combination of a new vibe where planets are entering a sign and boom, they're immediately making aspects to Pluto. And then within hours or, at most days, they're perfecting the aspect to Pluto. So that's really, really powerful because it doesn't give you any lag time to sort of get used to the energy. The energy just transitions and it's already, building up to that peak. And then from this point, we're going to take a look at the next thing on the timeline here. We see by 10:45 p.m. the same day, May the 20th, that Saturday, we're going to see the perfection of Mars opposing Pluto. So again, we have no time. There's Mars at 0 degrees and 16 arc minutes, already perfected over to Pluto's opposition here. So that's the perfection with that. Now, one good thing about the fact that this is all going to happen very quickly is it's also going to begin to dissipate very quickly. So once Mars moves across the exact perfected angle to Pluto, then slowly there's a kind of a bit of a recovery, but Mars is still going to be engaging Pluto for the next little while as he tries to gain separation away from Pluto by about 3 degrees. So that is part of the process here. And if we roll the clock forward, the next thing that happens is by May the 21st, the following day on Sunday, the sun has already entered Gemini right around about 4 a.m. and then is walking towards that 16 arc minutes by, we'll just call it 10 a.m. on Sunday, has perfected a trine back to Pluto. So I'm not even including in the themes anything about the sun trine Pluto. I think Monday's video next week is going to be just about this particular trine that happens because it's just too much, too many things and aspects to try to synthesize all at once. It becomes too convoluted. So we'll dive into this trine between the sun and Pluto on Monday, and then we'll sort of try to factor that in. But today we'll just talk about the T-square aspect that is seeding the new moon coming through. And the next thing that happens after that is we are going to see that Mars is going to perfect a square to Jupiter by Tuesday of next week, May the 23rd by 12:26 a.m. So this is kind of good because, again, even though we don't have much time to get used to the buildup of some of these energies between the planets, they perfect right away, and it's like ripping the Band-Aid off really quick and fast. So one thing or theme about this T-square, just in general, is the feeling that things change or come on suddenly, and then it's just like the Band-Aid just gets ripped off really fast. And then after that point, the energy begins to separate. But of course, it's very much alive, and until these planets clear each other by 3 degrees, we are still going to be within that those themes that are being reflected by the planets and the god-like energies. So we have to see, when does that happen next? We're going to go to Friday, May the 26th of that week by 2:43 a.m. Mars is going to disengage to the opposition with Pluto here. So that's the first leg of the T-square that drops out. And then if we go on to May the 31st, Wednesday, by 11:09 a.m., we are going to see, finally, here's Mars just beginning to separate beyond Jupiter here by, noontime or so. The aspect completely is broken apart now. So that's essentially when we can go, okay, these last couple of weeks, we've seen the new moon come through, and look at the sun here. We've got the sun at 9 degrees and 50, almost 10 degrees of Gemini already. And we have the moon at the end of Libra. It takes a couple more days as it goes through Scorpio, and then we get probably another day after that. So this is about 3 days before the full moon, which is going to be the culmination. So this T-square energy is really all about the first half of the next lunation cycle ahead that builds us up towards the culmination of the full moon moment. But which does separate out slightly before the full moon moment by 3 or 4 days or so. So that is kind of the story ahead. Now what I want to do is let's get into the themes to watch for. And how we're going to do this now is we're just going to synthesize all of this T-square energy. We're going to take the Mars square Jupiter, the Mars opposed Pluto, and the Jupiter square Pluto, all three of those aspects. And instead of trying to analyze and interpret each one individually, I've already gone ahead and done that ahead of time and tried to synthesize all of those archetypal energies down to something manageable and easy to understand. So that's what we're going to do now, is get into my 6 themes to watch for that are like a synthesis of all three aspects at once. One thing to note, though, is that Jupiter is co-present with Mercury and Uranus, and is heading, both Mercury and Jupiter are heading towards Uranus in the sign of Taurus. So that might be a clue as to part of the dynamic energy. In other words, Jupiter is sort of the pivot of the T-square. You get a sense that Uranus co-present there, Mercury co-present there. There might be a way in which we see the themes sort of heading towards that kind of archetypal energy. So we'll see that as we go ahead here. But let's talk about the first theme. This is going to be battles with those that have more authority than ourselves to hold on to what we believe or want. So that is a big part of the theme. And that's because we are seeing this very tense energy between Mars and Pluto. So you definitely get the possibility of a tension that leads into kind of a power struggle or a tug of war or something where we're battling. But what are we battling over? Well, we seem to be battling over Jupiter kinds of things in Taurus. And that is definitely going to speak to things that we want for ourselves. But it could be that Jupiter connection to what we believe in. There might be beliefs that we're engaging in. And it's like somehow our beliefs or actions or uh, direction forward, things that we want, things that we aspire for, or life goals, aspirations, all of those things, depending on how this is going to represent for you, Jupiter in Taurus, all of those Jupiter Taurus kinds of themes is what is sort of being battled at. And it might be that, Mars in the sign of Leo, there's a sense that you might have to deal with like a central authority of some kind. So this could be really anybody that has, kind of a rank above you, that somehow influences or affects what it is that Jupiter in Taurus is trying to go after, in other words. So that is theme number 1, is potential battles with people that have more authority than ourselves to hold on to what we believe or to go after what we want. Okay, theme number 2 is going to be an impulse to protect a delicate new unfolding or emerging part of ourselves, our dreams, or our freedoms going forward. I like this one a lot because if you think about Mars in the sign of Leo, that is really all about filling the need or impulse to protect something that is really important to ourselves. It gets at this higher meaning. Leo is a sign that is connecting to transcendent meaning, or eternal meaning, rather. It's not the tiny little frivolous things that Leo is concerned with. Leo is more concerned with what are the timeless values or timeless principles of purpose, and specifically to our lives. So there are going to be these ideals that we hold, that seem very central to us or important to our lives at this time. And Mars is signaling that there needs to be a perimeter that defends that. And what could that be about? I think that because Mars is making that square back to Jupiter, it might have something to do with the fact that Jupiter in Taurus is trying to grow something new in that springtime way. So you sort of imagine like these new shoots sprouting up for your little seedlings, and Mars is somehow being tasked, or Jupiter is saying, hey, I need you to set up a perimeter so these seedlings don't get damaged, right? So this could represent something that is unfolding within ourselves. It could represent something that we want for our lives, like our dreams, or it could be about our own personal freedom. So I think that really gets at some of the energy of this T-square. Okay, theme three. As our beliefs turn towards the light, we confront a spirit of pessimism, manipulation, or Machiavelli. This is because Taurus is in the light half of the year. Once the sun makes it across the vernal equinox and moves into Aries, we begin the light half of the year where there is more daytime than nighttime over the next 6 months. And as the sun heads towards the summer solstice at the end of Gemini, um, the light is increasing. Now, by the time this happens at the end of Gemini, the sun reaches the highest declination in the sky and is north and high up. And it's as close as it ever gets to the pole star, Polaris. So that's the North Star. The North Star in the ancient mythology or symbolism to ancient philosophers represented something that didn't rise or set. The pole star always stays in one place in the sky and everything spins around it. So this connects very much to a central ideal that we sort of head towards as the light is rising and moving towards the north and up in the sky. It's as if the symbolism is speaking to what is it that we really want in life? Where are you orienting your lifeboat towards? And Venus is the ruler of Taurus. So this is about things that we want, things that we desire, things that will make our lives beautiful or successful. And it's very goal oriented in that way. So as our beliefs turn towards this oriented growing of the light and aiming towards the pole star that represents what we want out of life, as we begin to do that, are there certain people or certain, I don't know, it could even be society writ large, but is there a spirit that we encounter that is pessimistic, that represents that Pluto in Aquarius kind of Saturnine pessimism, or even manipulation, where people don't want us to turn towards the light because it's going to, affect them somehow in a way that they don't want? Or could it be even in the most dramatic sense, could it be like a Machiavellian kind of energy where there is even some kind of hidden agenda or undermining, manipulation that doesn't have your best interest at heart? So I don't want to make it sound overly dramatic, but we are talking about Pluto being engaged with in opposition to Mars. So there definitely is the potential, I think, with this aspect to see some of those more dramatic twists and turns in the story. And probably for some of us, we will encounter that kind of spirit. So maybe it ranges from pessimism on the light side to manipulation in the middle, and then a downright, almost like evil kind of thing at the far end of the extreme. But, somewhere in there, is that because we are beginning to realign or turn ourselves in a way towards that pole star of what we want in our lives? And as we do things, this is going to affect the people around us, or it's going to have an impact on how we relate to the society or the community or groups of friends or what have you. So there might be the potential for that kind of dynamic to shape up, I think. Okay, now let's go into theme 4, becoming jealous of the light. This is going to be the flip side of that. So I just described what happens if you're sort of the Jupiter person, but we can't all be that Jupiter person. What happens when we become the person that is maybe acting pessimistic towards somebody, or even manipulative, or there are people that will engage in some pretty dirty tactics. Not saying that people that probably watch this channel and are interested in astrology, most of us have kind of a higher spiritual morality to us. So but be that as it may, when we look at this T-square, there might be, there could be people on the other side of that. So this is theme number 4, is kind of the other side of that coin, where um and not in a judgmental way we're going to describe this. This is more of like, how could we understand the other side of that? Becoming jealous of the light. Those that have more, what we want, are happier, or act self-righteous or selfish. This could be the extreme where the Jupiter Mars part of the T-square, we encounter that as just very off-putting, and we're like the more Pluto in Aquarius that's like, hey, just chill out, cool down, like you're getting way too zealotous about this. Like this, I know you want these things, but let's temper it, and let's temper it a little bit. Like, we don't have to be so crazy about it. Like, let's slowly go towards that or work towards that or whatever. But, on the more shadow side, deep down inside, maybe we could have to deal with our own inner feelings that we're sort of jealous of the light. So, there are people out there and we look at them and go, man, I wish I had that success. I wish I had that. And at times we can wrestle with those feelings of jealousy. So this isn't a judgment if you're on the Pluto Aquarian side, because, we're going to see both sides of the coin play out. And there is always room to understand how anybody, I think, this is my belief, there's always room to understand the other side no matter what, even if you don't agree or there are things that are we would consider extremely off-putting or maybe even evil in some circumstances. I think it at least serves to try to understand the other side. That's my own personal belief. But so coming at this from, how could we maybe fall into the trap or be grabbed by Pluto and end up dealing with feelings of jealousy that is of people moving towards what they want or towards the light in a sense. Okay, theme number 5 is going to be supported but isolated behind the castle wall. I really love this one. And I think the best way to describe this one is just to paint the picture of the image for you, to describe the image that I had in my mind. So, first of all, you have Mars in the sign of Leo. Leo is archetypally related to the king. So, what do you get when you get Mars in the sign of the king? It's like some kind of like defense of the king, right? It could be like the king's guard, or it could be just anything defensive that the king has as like a possession. So in my mind, I saw this image of, maybe I got this from movies where you see there's like a castle and there's a king inside the castle and he's got his men around and the castle is being attacked or is under besiegement, right? And you get the sense that the king needs to sort of keep himself in a defensive alertness, and he's maybe in that position where he's hiding behind the defenses, in within his castle, behind the walls of the castle, rather. And because when you end up being in a position where you're sort of trying to defend what you feel is very important to you or your self-interests, like a king trying to hold, authority within his kingdom or what have you, there could be that Pluto and Aquarius energy representing some kind of outside force that is opposing you, maybe even attacking you, and that quality of the opposition. Oppositions in ancient astrology were said to be of the nature of Saturn. And of course, Saturn has always been related to kind of being isolated or lonely, So you get this sense that there's a little bit of this energy where, because there is the need to protect your self-interest and to defend those things, that creates a kind of isolation from things outside of that. So this is kind of a sense of where maybe that is a little bit of the energy for this particular T-square aspect. Not that you shouldn't protect. There are definitely times where it's absolutely necessary and appropriate to protect things that are important to us. But just as a consequence of doing that, sometimes we're behind the walls of our castle and we're not completely connected to what's happening outside, right? Okay, now the flip side of this, again, going back to if you're more on if you get grabbed by Pluto and you're more in his domain, looking over at Mars, and looking back at Jupiter here, what could this be if you're more on that side of the situation or dynamic? We could be opposing tyranny or irrational, passionate fanaticism. If you feel or sense that people are going back to Mars and Leo are acting incredibly dominating, there's like this sense of dominating authority that is really tyrannical. If you encounter that, or if you encounter the zealotous fanaticism of Jupiter in Taurus, who is very impassioned and is sort of maybe defying logic and running on belief to an extreme, you could feel again like that Aquarian archetype that's like, hey, you know, this is just too much. Like, it's great what you want and all, but we have to temper this a little bit with being more rational, being more level headed. And so you could encounter both sides of this T square, maybe not at the same time, but you could get a sense of like maybe you're encountering the really dogmatic belief structures or the fanatical desires of somebody, or you could encounter the tyrannical, over authoritarian domination of an authority figure. I could see both of those things happening. So you could be on that side of it. And again, no judgment to whatever place these aspects are going to line up with experiences that we have. We could be on either side. We could be on the Jupiter side. We could be on the Mars side. We could be on the Pluto side. I think all sides are going to be relevant here, but I'm just trying to cover particular angles that people might be experiencing or showing up on. So that is what I have for today. Thanks so much, everybody, for watching. I hope you got something good out of this. I would love to hear how you all experience some of this energy as it comes through over the next couple of weeks or so. That is going to be really fascinating to see some concrete examples that you guys live through, because that's always the best teacher anyway. But take care of yourselves, and I'll be back again on Monday. We'll get into the Sun trine Pluto aspect that really ties into this as we go forward here. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a great one, and I'll see you soon. Bye for now.